Hi, everybody, and welcome to Grief, Trauma, and the Coronavirus. I am your host, Dr. Dawn-Elise Snipes. There have been a lot of questions from clinicians and from, the general public lately about, what is it that we're feeling right now and how can we best help people or how can we best cope ourselves with the grief that we're experiencing as a result of coronavirus. So in this presentation, we're going to identify the unique losses associated with coronaviruses and other pandemics, explore symptoms of trauma and grief because this situation has both been traumatic and caused us to experience grief, and identify ways to address trauma and grief related to the coronavirus. So we're going to identify what's going on, but also talk about some ways to start addressing it. A traumatic event is any event that causes physiological or emotional harm to a person, either directly because it happens to them or indirectly because they see it happen to other people. Now, what are we seeing every single day when we turn on the TV right now? We are seeing people getting injured either financially or physically by the coronavirus. We are seeing the impact of this monster. So it is traumatic and it's scary because it's invisible. It's scary because we don't know how to control it. There's a lot of unknowns. So people are struggling with a lot of anxiety, which is leading to symptoms like you would experience after what you might want to call a traditional trauma. We're experiencing more hypervigilance. We're experiencing more frustration and anxiety. I do want to point out, though, that coronavirus, cancer, influenza, and car accidents are each going to kill tens of thousands of people this year. So 606,520 Americans will die of cancer. That's a lot. 80,000 Americans died from the flu in 2018, and they're looking at, somewhere between 24 and 50,000 dying this year from the flu. 38,000 Americans died from car accidents last year, and 67,300 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2018. My point is that there are a lot of things that happen every year that wipe out tens of thousands of Americans. So I want us to put that into perspective, but also to recognize why coronavirus seems to be causing so much more trauma for us. And it's because we are exposed to it all day, every day, and it's taking a lot more away from us. When the flu happened, even in 2018, when 80,000 Americans died from the flu, we didn't have these shutdowns. We didn't have these loss of freedoms and liberties and things. So we're experiencing a lot more losses as a result of coronavirus right now. And it's important to help people understand why they are feeling the intensity of feelings that they're experiencing. So with coronavirus and other pandemics, but we're going to talk about specifically right now coronavirus, we have a lot of unique things that are happening. There are deaths because of the virus, but there's also deaths because of cancer and influenza, and a lot of people die of a lot of different things every single day. But because hospitals are shut down, we are not able, or loved ones are not able to go into the hospital to say their final goodbyes, to support their loved one who is dying. The restrictions are so tight in the hospitals that a lot of people are dying alone, or, if they're really lucky, they may have, one other person there. But the families are not able to say their goodbyes, which is difficult both for the person who's dying as well as for the families because they don't get the same sense of closure. Yes, they can FaceTime and, say their goodbyes to the person or whatever, but it's just not the same as being able to be there and hold their hand or kiss them on the forehead. We also aren't able to support each other as much in grief. If you have a loved one die, for example, You're not able to all gather at the hospital or all gather at the funeral home in order to support one another in grief right now. So you feel a lot more isolated, which is, adding to the trauma of this situation. We also have people dying of coronavirus and cancer and other things right now that are dying out of order, if you want to think about it that way. We expect that as parents, we will outlive our children will outlive us. I'm sorry. When a child dies before a parent, that is out of order. And we're seeing a lot of young people who seemingly had no underlying health issues, or seemingly, we didn't know about health issues they had or whatever, have died from this. So there's a lot of anxiety surrounding the deaths, but we're also seeing people experience deaths that are out of order, that don't make sense in terms of what they expected. You expect when somebody gets to be 90, 95 that, they may die, not when they are 30 or 35. Other things we're losing, social connections. And yes, there is FaceTime, there is the phone, there is the internet, but it's not quite the same as the camaraderie you get when you go to work and see your office mates, you see your colleagues. It's not quite the same as the camaraderie you get when you go to school and you see your classmates. Yes, you can communicate digitally, but there is a difference, especially for people who are more extroverted. They are feeling a significant loss and is having a significant impact on their life right now. We're also not able to see our friends as much and do the things that we used to do. Maybe you used to go to the gym with your friend every single day, and you can't do that right now. So those social connections are changing, and the way they used to be, the qualities they used to have, may not exist anymore. A lot of people are also missing celebrations and transitions. Prom and graduation have been canceled for just about every high school throughout the United States. And I don't know if other countries have prom and graduation at the same time, but a lot of youth who have worked, basically their entire lives to get to high school graduation is very anticlimactic, because they're not getting to graduate and they're not getting to have the prom that they always thought that they would have. And that's a big deal. That's one of those rites of passage for a lot of people. We also have people who aren't able to attend funerals. We have thousands and thousands of people dying every day, and they are not able to, their loved ones are not able to congregate in order to have a supporting funeral and go through the rituals that we go through after someone dies. So it prevents the family from getting as much closure as, they may need to, which I talked about a little bit already. Weddings. Some weddings are getting postponed. Some people are, having their weddings anyway, and I'm not really sure, how they might be doing that virtually, but it is causing a lot of people a lot of consternation because plans are changing. They had this huge wedding planned, with, tens of thousands of dollars in catering and dresses and all this stuff. And it's all kind of falling apart. So people may be grieving that. And then we have births, and people are still having babies, even though this pandemic happened. The babies didn't get the message, so they're still popping out. So I've heard stories of people who are going into labor, and, some hospitals aren't even allowing birth coaches in. It's just the person who is giving birth and the medical staff, which, that's a big change. It's a big change for the family not to be able to come and welcome the new little life into the world. And it is terrifying for a lot of new parents to be bringing in this helpless little life into this environment where you don't know where the invisible enemy is hiding, and you don't know if your baby is going to get out of the hospital safely. It's terrifying. So people are grieving that loss of sense of safety. We are grieving the loss of our freedom and the loss of our habits. We are on lockdown. We're all grounded right now. We can't go shopping like we used to. We can't go to the gym like we used to. We can't go to sports events like we used to. I mean, things that we take for granted as part of American lifestyle, baseball and apple pie, it just ain't happening right now. And we also have the restrictions on our freedom that we never expected we would have, at least in this country, where we're, fined or even imprisoned for breaking this quarantine order. And that is really terrifying to a lot of people. So a lot of people are grieving the loss of their freedoms. And I'm sure there are other examples of losses of freedoms or habits that people are grieving right now because they're not able to do it. We're grieving the loss of safety in our environment. Now, whenever I get a package, I think, should I be putting on gloves? Or I bring it into the house and we're keeping all of our packages in the garage. And then I come in and I disinfect my hands. And I think to myself, is this the new normal? We get packages, then we've got to wait 3 days before we can open them in order for them to be, debugified or whatever. And so that's a big change for me, and going out into places, not being able to feel comfortable, even going to the grocery store, that I can come home and not be contaminated and not expose my family to the coronavirus is terrifying. Now, whether I am exposing them or not, we can argue about the semantics of that. But the point being, there is that fear that if I go out and if I happen to come in contact with someone who is communicable, then, anywhere I go, I could potentially become a new vector. Our assumptions about the world and the future are also dashed. Before this happened, people, expected to go to sleep and get up in the morning and go to work and, yada, 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 life as normal. And that normal is probably never going to exist the same way again. And a lot of people are grieving that because they liked their life before. And so they're having to adjust to this ambiguity because we don't know what normal is going to look like in the future because we're still on lockdown. We still have cases that are going up. We still have death rates that are going up. And we're grieving not only the loss of what we anticipated our future being like, but we're also grieving the loss of knowledge. We're grieving the loss of that sense of, I know what to expect in the morning. I know what is dangerous. I knew before if I went into, certain parts of a hospital that, people were really, really super sick, that, that was potentially a dangerous place to be and what I had to do to scrub down and to prevent contaminating anyone else or spreading the germ. But with this, we don't really know. So there's a lot of frustration because we don't know what we should be doing. And a lot of us like knowledge, and that lack of knowledge is something that we're really struggling with right now. And then there's a lot of people, if not everybody, or the majority of people, struggling with a loss of security right now. And Abraham Maslow talked about our pyramid of needs, and that baseline that base of the pyramid are our biological needs, our ability to get enough food, to get medical care, to keep a roof over our head, and the finances to pay for it. And all of those things are kind of in limbo for millions of people right now. They may have seen their retirement just kind of disappear. They're not working anymore. And then all of a sudden, the retirement nest egg that they planned on living off of for the rest of their life is obliterated. So they are really stressed right now. And they're grieving that, they may have lost their retirement. They may have to go back to work. There are other people who have lost their jobs, or they don't know if they're going to have a job to go back to. So their financial security is in limbo. There are people who are afraid that they're going to lose their housing because their finances have been interrupted. And there are people who are afraid, and there's a lot of people who are experiencing difficulties getting food right now. Some because of finances and others because of supply chain disruptions. Farmers are dumping out millions of gallons of milk every single day because they can't get it from point A to point B. Yet we go to the grocery store and there isn't a lick of milk on the grocery store shelves anywhere. And we're going to see more of this in the coming months, which is frustrating. But our fear that we're not going to be able to get enough food to feed our family, that we're not going to be able to keep a roof over our head, that we're not going to be able to pay our bills, is weighing heavily on a lot of people. And that all complicates the grief process because we're grieving that loss of security. Remembering with grief that it is a normal reaction to a loss. And grief reactions differ based on your prior experiences. If you were somebody who went through the Great Depression before, which my husband's grandparents did, they are having different reactions to this situation than we are, who have never gone through something similar to this before. Children are going to react differently. We're going to react differently based on our age because of, a 5-year-old has a very different understanding of what's going on than a 25-year-old. And a 65-year-old may have differing reactions because, as I mentioned earlier, their security, their way of life, their retirement that they've been living in for 5 years, that may be gone now, and they may be having to go back to work. So there are different ways that this situation impacts people based on their age, but there's also different understandings of the situation based on your age and your history. Grief reactions also differ based on the number of losses associated with the event. If you're working with somebody, or if you are somebody who has a job that is considered essential and you're still going into work, you're still going to at least be able to pay your bills. You may not have a lot of discretionary income, but you're at least able to pay your bills. Then you don't have that particular loss. But as you start stacking up those losses that I talked about, if you have a loved one who is dying of cancer, a loved one who gives birth and you're not able to go visit the new baby, if you have concerns about your financial security, the more of those things that add up, the more intense your grief reaction is going to be. Social support availability also affects grief. We can deal with a whole lot more if we have got support, if we're not trying to hold it all ourselves, if we've got a village, so to speak, to help us hold up this burden, it is easier for us to deal with it. Now, social support doesn't necessarily mean in person, face-to-face, violate social distancing guidelines, social support. But social support does mean having other people in your life that are there and able to be emotionally available. And one of the things I'm seeing a lot right now is people are so verklempt with their own stress that they are having difficulty being emotionally available for others. So there's a lot of people out there who need support, but everybody is so needy, and there's not a whole lot of people that have the energy to give support. Another thing that affects grief reactions is the level of number of stressors people have had in the past 6 months and their history of mental illness or addiction. Any of those things can make a person more vulnerable to stress because they're already worn down. They're already struggling to cope with something, and then pile this on. And, my heart really goes out to those people who were hit by the tornado on Easter. Here in Middle Tennessee, we were hit with a tornado right before COVID struck, and there's still a lot of rebuilding going on. And it just seems like it won't let up, just one thing after another. And it can be just overwhelming and exhausting for a lot of people. So let's talk about some common physical reactions to grief. And understanding these symptoms is part and parcel to coping with them. We can't make them go away. No matter how much I want to, I can't take away people's pain. I can't tell them that, everything's going to be fine. We'll all go back to normal, because that's not the way it's going to be. We're all having to learn how to adjust and how to cope. But during this period, especially during this period when we don't have any clear, concrete answers about when things are going to get back to some semblance of normal and what that will look like, a lot of people's threat response system, their HPA axis, is just, cranked way up. That's our survival mechanism. That's our body saying, you know what, there's a threat here. You need to be on guard so you can survive. Well, that's cool. We want to survive. That's wonderful. Unfortunately, when it's sustained, it leads to sleep changes. People, waking up periodically throughout the night, having difficulty getting to sleep or wanting to sleep all the time. And all of those things can actually increase the HPA axis, the stress response, even more. It's important to keep a stable schedule. Whatever your schedule was before COVID, before quarantine, try to keep that same schedule now. Your body will really thank you for it. Eating changes are really common. We gravitate towards high sugar, high fat foods because they are, quote, comfort foods. They actually prompt the release of dopamine and serotonin, our feel-good chemicals, in our body. So a lot of times we see people either gravitating towards those foods or not having any appetite at all. Either way, you're probably not getting a balanced diet to give your body the building blocks it needs to create the brain chemicals to help you feel happy and calm and content and those sorts of things. So trying to eat a relatively healthy diet, trying to get a green vegetable in there every day is a step in the right direction. I'm not saying you've got to be eating a perfect diet right now. I don't think anybody is. But if you are at least trying to eat somewhat colorfully, it will help you. Reduced libido is really common. When that threat response system is activated, your body is going, now is not the time to procreate. So testosterone and estrogen levels are altered, which are geared towards helping us survive, to fight or flee. Once stress goes down, libido will probably go back up, but it's important to just be compassionate with yourself during this time. Increased muscle tension occurs a lot. When our stress response system is activated, think about it like the tennis player that's on the baseline waiting for that ball to come towards them. You don't ever want to stand flat-footed at the baseline because then you're not ready when the ball comes your way. You want to be bouncing on your toes. And that's kind of what we're doing when our stress response system is activated. Our muscles stay a little bit tense because we're always poised so we can fight or flee. Increased pain is common because of increased muscle tension as well as reduced serotonin levels. We may experience more pain, and that is a natural reaction to increased stress as well as grief. It's also important to recognize that if you're sleeping a lot, not only is that throwing your circadian rhythms out of whack, but you do need to pay attention to your ergonomics. I know it's really easy to binge watch Netflix and get your neck all kinked up, which will also increase pain. People also experience gastrointestinal disturbances when they're experiencing grief or trauma. That is normal. If you're experiencing gastrointestinal disturbances, obviously you can talk to your doctor if it's bad enough, but just being gentle with your system, making sure you're drinking enough water, making sure you're eating a relatively healthy diet, and also doing things like getting out walking can help balance your energy and kind of keep your system moving. In children, you also may see developmental regression where they start wetting the bed again, they start sucking their thumb. Children's reaction to stress, to trauma, is often to regress to a state where their parents were in charge, where their parents were taking 100% care of them. And interestingly, they don't think about it, but that regressive behavior does elicit more of a caretaking response from the parents, which is calming and soothing to the children. Children are very perceptive of stress responses in their adults. So if you are stressed, then you may see, even in a 3-year-old who doesn't understand what's going on, you may see some disorganization or developmental regression because they're noticing that you're stressed. And by regressing, you provide more care to them, you react to them in a more attentive sort of way, which helps them feel safer. It's a very interesting evolutionary behavior. Emotions associated with grief include agitation and restlessness. You want it to be over. You want to figure out, you've got energy. You want to figure out how to use your energy to make it stop. Unfortunately, we don't know how to do that right now. So people are sitting with this restless energy, this nervous energy. Find something to do with that energy. I have cleaned the baseboards twice a week since this started. That's one of the things I do with my restlessness and my excess energy. Because sitting there reading the same stories over and over again, reading the same journal articles over and over again, I'm not getting any more new information, and it just frustrates me. So I use my energy for something else that would help me feel more relaxed. Anger is perfectly normal. When we experience a trauma, we want to find someone to blame. Trauma equates to threat. Threat equates to not surviving. So we want to figure out a way to prevent that threat from ever happening again, which means we've got to figure out who to blame. If we were back in the caveman days, we would know to blame the tiger for eating us. So we would know that that's a threat, and we could be angry at the tiger. Right now, we're not sure who to be angry at. So there's a lot of widespread anger trying to figure out, who should we push away? Who should we be angry at? Who should we guard against to keep this from happening again? And there are no clear answers. Recognizing when you're feeling angry and taking steps to figure out what is it that you have control over right now can help you start taking steps away from just stewing in it. Anxiety, fear, and worry are the same way. We don't have a lot of answers, and a lot of the answers change on a daily basis. What we can do is focus on what we do have control over. Can you keep yourself from being exposed? How can you protect yourself the best? What resources are out there to help you with your security? Looking at the CARES Act and contacting United Way 211 and social services if you need assistance, for example, with financial or food resources. Taking positive steps, active steps to address whatever the issues are that you're worried about. Apathy and numbness is totally normal at this point. We talk about fight or flee a lot, but there's also fight, flee, freeze, and then the fourth F is, to use a clean term, forget about it. But you can think of the other F that might be used there. When people have experienced stress for so long and it's just like, I can't make it stop, I don't know what to do, we get exhausted and we start feeling apathetic, numb, and just like, forget it. That's normal. Recognizing that means that you are, really stressed out right now is important. So you can start taking steps to do what you need to do to start feeling some happy again. Even if it means going on Pinterest and looking at, silly animal videos, which is what we do every single day. Betrayal. A lot of people are feeling betrayed right now, betrayed by the government, betrayed by their own bodies, betrayed by, you can lots of betrayal going on. And it's important to recognize that betrayal is a form of anger. We're angry at people for doing things that we didn't want them to do. And recognize, what do we have the ability to do about it? And what don't we have control over? There's a saying in recovery: grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And some of this we're just not going to be able to do anything about right now. Now, in the future, the way we vote, what we do henceforth, we may be able to prevent it from happening again, but it's important to recognize what we do have control over. And holding on to betrayal and resentment is just going to keep you stressed out, which is going to reduce your immune system, which is not what you want right now. Depression, sadness, and hopelessness. We see all these numbers of people dying. We see all these numbers of the economy getting wiped out. We see all this death and destruction, and we hear all this sky is falling, Chicken Little talk. It can get overwhelming, and you can feel hopeless and helpless and sad for yourself, for the economy, for everybody. It's overwhelming. And no doubt, one of the things you can do is turn it off. Turn off the news. Turn off the television if it is triggering you, and do things that help you feel happy each day. Focus on the things that you do have in your life that make you feel hopeful. And there may not be a lot of them right now, but it's important to try to remember that there is some good going on, around somewhere right now. There was a beautiful sunrise this morning. You may have to work at it, but trying to find things to be happy about each day, and recognize that there are some things that are just out of our control is difficult. Much easier said than done, but it is helpful. Disbelief is another feeling that people experience during grief, and we are having trouble accepting this reality of what may be going on. And it's not that this is necessarily worse than other things. As I told you earlier, over 600,000 people will die of cancer this year. But it is one more thing that we're adding to the list of potential enemies that can wipe out tens of thousands of people every year. And, that's disheartening at the very least. So there's difficulty accepting the reality that there is another virus out there that is different than the flu that could also wipe us out. We don't like finding out that there are more threats out there. People are experiencing guilt right now. Some people are experiencing guilt for not doing enough. Maybe they're not healthcare workers and they want to be helping, but they don't know how, but they're on quarantine, so they're not allowed to leave their house. So they feel trapped and frustrated. They may feel guilty for being healthy because, other people are getting sick and dying right now. And they may feel guilty for not planning for this, for not making sure that they had enough money to cover the rent payment, for buying the boat 3 months ago, instead of saving that money for a rainy day. Guilt is anger tied up in the past. There is nothing you can do about it. So figuring out what you can do, and if there is anything you can do, and then taking steps is helpful. People feel helpless right now, and there is a certain amount of helplessness that is just, it is what it is. We don't know how to prevent this virus completely. We know washing our hands and social distancing and everything helps, but there's a certain amount of helplessness in knowing how to treat it. We know that it's going to kill people. We know that there's a certain number of people that get this virus that are going to die, and that is terrifying, and it makes a lot of us feel very helpless. Again, focusing on the things that you can control. If my stepfather gets it, he's older and, he is in that high risk group. So what can we do? What am I empowered to do if I visited him? would be to, not go into the same room, visit him through plexiglass, wear a mask, wear gloves. There are a lot of things I can do to protect him, and a lot of things he can do to protect himself. Is there a 100% guarantee that he's going to stay healthy? No. But there are things that we can do. So focusing on what you are empowered to do, what you do have the power to control, can help. Impatience. A lot of us are starting to feel impatient, and, I get it. We want answers. We want it to be over. We want to know when the economy is going to open, but we just don't have those answers right now. And most people don't like that answer. We want something concrete. We want to know that, this is when it's going to happen. But there's just no way to tell. Just like there's no way to know exactly what day you're going to die, or, there are a lot of things that we have to deal with ambiguity, and because we just don't know a hard and fast answer for the date or the time or the how or the who. We're having to be patient. And when everything else in our world is topsy-turvy, it's difficult to be patient. And with that, there are no easy answers except for taking a breath and focusing on the moment, not what we don't know, but what we do know. Loneliness is not uncommon right now because a lot of people are quarantined by themselves or with families that they don't get along with. They're not able to see their friends or their colleagues. Reaching out, it's not exactly the same, but reaching out through video chat, reaching out through text chat can help quell some of that loneliness. Doing watch parties can also be very helpful. Addressing the shock of this all. I remember in February, I was teaching a seminar in Chicago and talking to some people about, coronavirus and everything. And they were like, oh, no, it's no big deal. Nothing's going to happen, da, 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 da. And then lo and behold, 3 weeks later, everything is shutting down. And we were all kind of reeling from the shock of it all because we lived in that little denial world for so long. So shock is one of those things we've got to deal with. It's like, oh crap, this is reality now. And wrapping our heads around it is definitely a challenge. And those who are working in emergency services, especially at the hospitals, are experiencing that regularly. And I remember hearing the president talk about going and seeing trucks that were transporting bodies and how shocked he was just to actually see that. Some people will also experience thankfulness right now, and it's important to remember that is okay. It's okay to be thankful that you have your health. It's okay to be thankful that you have a good job. It's okay to be thankful that your loved ones are okay. That's all right. And we can have worry about other people. We can be compassionate, but we can also be thankful. And gratitude is not a bad feeling. Actually, let's embrace that. There's a lot of uncertainty, which goes along with impatience and anxiety. Okay, we don't know what the next turn is going to be. There's been a lot of, it's almost like doing the cha-cha, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And there's uncertainty about when and what will open, where it'll open, what's going on. Taking a breath again, going back to that what we talked about with impatience, and relying on what we do know. What are we certain about? And everything else, figuring it out along the way. Recognizing that we are becoming very good problem solvers, very good creative problem solvers with this crisis. We're having to tap into a whole lot of ingenuity that we didn't really realize existed before. And I think that is one of the blessings that's coming out of this, is we are seeing that there is a lot of ingenuity and there is a lot of resilience within our country. Some people will experience a sense of uselessness and worthlessness because they're not working, they're not contributing, they're not helping in the fight. And I get that. Figuring out what you can do to feel like you are making a difference. You can write thank you letters to first responders. You can, there are a lot of creative ideas online for ways that you can help while you are in quarantine. And if you're feeling like you need to do a little bit more, then that's one thing that you might be able to do. A lot of the animal shelters have had to shutter. So if you're able to foster animals for a while, that's another thing that you can do that doesn't involve contact with a lot of other people. And you also may feel weak, frail, and powerless because you just don't know. If you get this virus, you don't know what impact it's going to have on your body. So you may feel vulnerable to what's going on right now. And that's okay. Recognizing all emotions are natural reactions and figuring out what is the best next step for you at this point. Cognitive reactions that are common during trauma and grief include difficulties concentrating. Write things down. When your fight or flight system is in high gear, it's telling you to fight or flee, not remember a grocery list. So write things down. If you're continuously thinking about the things that you've lost as a result, or the things that you could lose as a result of this, that's normal. That's your body trying to forecast, trying to prepare, trying to plan. Just like it scans and looks for that hungry lion, well, the antiquated part of you, that makes sense that you're doing that. It's important that you try to contain that. So give yourself, if you want to think about it, for an hour a day. Give yourself an hour a day where you can pour through the news and read through the journal articles or do whatever you're going to do. But then try to focus the rest of the day on doing other things, on taking advantage of what's going on, watching movies, cleaning the house, planting a garden, doing things that are uplifting for you. When you start thinking about the loss again, return your attention to what you're doing in the moment and really practice mindfulness. Excessive searching for answers is very common, as I talked about earlier. When we have answers, we feel like we're empowered. Right now, we don't have answers, so we feel very helpless. So it makes sense that we want to find answers, but there may not be any. And it's important to recognize, once you have gotten all the knowledge that's there, that there isn't anything else. There isn't some nugget that's hiding under a cushion somewhere. And you may just need to say, all right, this is all we know right now, and then move on to something else. And it is really hard, but it's important to not get stuck searching for answers for hours every single day. You may also have difficulty with making decisions and problem solving right now. I said there's a lot of ingenuity that is coming out of this crisis, but there's also a lot of people that feel stuck and they're having problems solving just everyday problems that are existing. They're having difficulty thinking clearly. And this is where social support is so helpful, because generally, if you can get 2 or more heads together and start thinking about something, you can come up with some answers. You can have somebody that can help you evaluate your options and make your decision. Poor memory goes along with difficulties in concentrating. Don't expect to remember things right now. If you forgot your anniversary, if you forgot somebody's birthday, it's nice once you remember it to apologize and, make amends, but don't expect yourself to remember everything that's going on. In our house, we have a dry erase board on the refrigerator, and that's where we write notes to each other right now. So we can remember, I have one child that's getting ready to start college, one child that's graduating college. We have a grocery list up there. And then, there's 17 different things that have to be done every day, but we keep a list of them because I know I'm not going to remember all of them. You may have self-destructive thoughts, and if you are having those thoughts, it's important to seek out professional help immediately. Just start talking to a healthcare provider or a behavioral health provider. You can do it online, and it's really important to do that. Interestingly, some people may have increased creative expression through music, writing, and art. And if somebody is able to channel their distress through those things, I think that is absolutely wonderful. So even if you're not feeling it right now, you might try it and see if that helps you clear your head a little bit. Socially, after a trauma, during a grief situation, some people try to stay constantly active. Well, on quarantine, it's really hard to stay constantly active. People are starting to run out of stuff to do. So trying to be creative with what you can do, whether it is playing board games or learning new recipes. There are things you can do, learning a new hobby, learning a language. But it's important to have things to help you stay busy so you're not feeling agitated like you are a lion stuck in a cage and just pacing back and forth. Some people overachieve or underachieve when they are experiencing grief. Your underachievers just don't have the energy. They don't have the desire. They're just like, what's the point? And that also kind of goes along with depression. So we do want to recognize that as a sign of grief and trauma and reach out to them to provide support. People who are overachieving are often either trying to stay busy so they don't have to think about it, or they may be trying to get approval in order to make sure that they are going to be safe and supported. Going along with anger, there's a lot of blaming that happens when there is a loss of some sort, whether it's trauma or some other grief. When my mother got sick, I got angry at her because she smoked her whole life, but I realized that wasn't purposeful. That didn't help anything at all. I got really angry at the doctors. I got there was a lot of blaming. I wanted to be angry at somebody. I wanted to be angry at something. And nobody I got angry at was going to change the fact that it was what it was. And so finally I just got angry at the cancer. And that still didn't do any good because cancer don't care if I'm angry. But recognizing that blaming and anger are natural reactions, but it's important, especially during quarantine and in grief situations and traumatic situations, to look at how effective that blame is. Is blaming somebody, is being angry at them right now helpful to solving the situation? Social withdrawal or clinginess, some people go one way, some people go the others. Those are natural. We may see it in adults as well as children. And that's how people cope when they feel overwhelmed, when they need to distance themselves from the pain and the misery. They may withdraw, or they may reach out because they need support and they need to feel like somebody is there to help them and protect them. Seeking approval and reassurance from others goes along with clinginess. Being aggressive or irritable or getting into more arguments. And unfortunately, we've seen the domestic violence rates skyrocket, as well as child abuse reports skyrocket since all of this started. People are living in close quarters. People are stressed, so their patience is thin already. And a lot of that frustration at what's going on and frustration at the situation often gets aimed at people that we live with, and it comes out as aggression or irritability. And it's really important for each of us to practice mindfulness and recognize how we're feeling and not take it out. If you have a bad day at work and you come home and, you yell at the dog, well, the dog didn't do anything. The dog's like, well, what the heck's your problem? We have the same sort of thing going on right now. You may be angry at the virus. You may be angry at the situation. You may be angry at a lot of things. So it's important to make sure you're not taking that anger out on the people that you are quarantined with or the people that you love. We may see increased acting out or disorganization in children. Like I mentioned before, a lot of times when children feel anxious, they become more disorganized, or they may act out intentionally or not intentionally in order to get the attention and from the parents, and to make sure that the rules still apply and to get some structure. Sometimes children are just craving that structure. Please let me know that things are going to be the same or okay, that the rules still apply. And when they get that, it makes them feel calmer and safer because they know that, okay, I know what to expect. There are also in children maybe changes in their play, really young children, with themes of loss. So if you see them playing, with their little action figures or whatever they play with, and there are themes of loss or themes that parallel what they're going through right now, that's normal. But it's also important to talk with them very honestly about what's going on and what they can do to protect themselves, and cut them a little slack because their world has changed a lot too. And, what they're used to has completely changed. So we need to be responsive to them, but also not pathologize what they're doing. Recognize that by using those themes in their play, they're trying to make sense of what's going on and understand, and maybe even get some control over the situation, because as they act it out, they are determining the reality in their make-believe world. Longer-term reactions we need to consider. Fear of going into public places or crowds may persist for months or even years, depending on your exposure to the virus. We do need to recognize how that's going to impact our lives, but also how it impacts our emotional health. If, you start finding that you get stressed out when you're going to the mall or going shopping after this is over, it's important to recognize that and devise a plan to make it as least stressful as possible. There may be increased anxiety around people who sneeze or cough. We sneeze and cough for a lot of reasons, but when we see somebody doing that, we may automatically go into that fight or flee response for a while. There can be difficulty concentrating at work or at school due to hypervigilance. Once we get back to work and school, we may be more hypervigilant of people getting too close or coughing or sneezing. So we're so busy subconsciously paying attention to everything going on around us, it's harder for us to focus on our work. There is likely, according to an article in The Lancet, and, just good old common sense, going to be increases in the incidence of depression, anxiety, and addictive behaviors, not just substance abuse, but also pornography, gambling, and eating disorders. We need to be aware that these things are going to happen and have a plan for identifying them and intervening as early as possible. And finally, in children, there may be some significant separation anxiety when they start having to go back to school because they haven't had to for so long. So when they start going back to school, in most cases in the fall, there may be a fair amount of resistance and separation anxiety because they may be afraid of getting the virus, or they may just not want to go back to that routine. They got used to homeschooling, and we need to know how we're going to handle that and what it's going to look like. So coping, let's just kind of go through a few more things. Accept your feelings without judgment. You feel how you feel, and that is normal and natural. It's what you do with those feelings. Do you stew in them? Do you feed them? Or do you notice, hey, I'm angry about this. What are my options to deal with this anger? And then take proactive steps to improve the next moment. Identify the losses you are experiencing or thoughts you are having that trigger your feelings of anxiety or depression or despair. When you look at those, ensure that you're using fact-based reasoning. For example, how at risk are you and your loved ones of getting sick, of financial instability, or of homelessness? Some people may have already created the most catastrophic situation in their head, and the probability of that happening is pretty small, but they're focused on that right now. So use fact-based reasoning. What are the facts for my belief? What are the facts against my belief? And what's the probability that this will happen? Examine, in fact-based reasoning, what resources are available to you. Yeah, you may be furloughed right now, but what sorts of resources are available in terms of unemployment or from the CARES Act? What jobs are currently available? There are lots of places that are hiring if you're able to go to work. And what parts of the situation do you have control over? You have control over your exposure levels. You have control over whether you wash your hands. You have control over whether you eat a healthy diet and maintain a good sleep schedule to keep your body as resilient as possible. There are a lot of things you do have control over. Identify any past issues this situation might be triggering. If it's triggering times in the past, maybe when you were grounded by your parents or something. I don't know. But if this situation is triggering past traumas, then it's important to remember that and identify how it's impacting you, how this situation is the same and different than those situations, and the best way to deal with it. Identify the reactions you're having and address them individually. If you're having sleep problems, figure out why and address it. If you've got loss of appetite, figure out why and address it. Look at your symptoms and start, knocking them out or knocking them down one at a time. Be compassionate with yourself. You're not going to have an A day every day. Right now, you may not have an A day any day. So be compassionate and recognize that, the majority of us are struggling. And that's okay right now because this is a very unusual situation. Identify the meaning behind the symptoms or behaviors. If you are feeling anxious, figure out why. What am I afraid of right now? And then you can start using that fact-based reasoning to identify whether those fears are fact-based and valid. Each time you have a thought about something you can't do, like, I got up this morning and I thought, oh crap, I can't go to the gym because it's closed. Identify what you can do instead. I could ride the stationary bike. I could do calisthenics. I could go out on a run. There are things I could do. I could clean the house. There are a lot of things I could do instead. So recognizing that, one thing may be off the table, but there are other options. So I don't feel as disempowered. Coronavirus has caused people to experience a combination of both grief and trauma. Recognizing the symptoms of grief and trauma in yourself and family members can help mitigate the impact. As soon as you understand or you recognize these symptoms and you can kind of see where they're coming from, then you can start taking steps to address them. There's no right or wrong way to feel right now. It's important to acknowledge feelings, accept them without judgment, and decide the best way to handle them on a daily basis, as they come up. Remember, there is no magic cure for grief, and until we're able to start to find our new normal, many people are going to continue to struggle with the loss of control and the lack of answers. I wish I had a better resolution for you, but unfortunately, it is what it is right now. So one of the things that we need to figure out how to radically accept is the ambiguity. All right, thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.